When we take a photo or capture a video, everything is created by the light or photons that are reflected off the environment and the subjects around us. How does a digital camera turn these rays of light into image? We're going to unravel this technical mystery today. My name is Timothy Reese, and I've worked in the television, film, and photography world as a director of photography and a photographer for nearly 20 years. Check out my videos as we cover not only the how, but also the why of various technical and creative techniques used in the creation of real images. Light, which is actually a form of energy made up of small particles called photons, is all around us. Not only coming from the sun or artificial lights, but also in reflection off of everything and everyone we see. A digital sensor combined with a lens captures all this reflected light, interprets its intensity and color, then encodes those levels into digital sequences of numbers, and then finally assembles them to create an image. It's an interesting process that, when shooting video, can happen dozens, if not hundreds of times a second. Let's take a closer look. The first thing a camera has to do is focus the light onto the sensor, and for that we need a lens, similar to how one might use a magnifying glass to focus the rays of the sun to a tight beam. The focused light then lands on the camera's digital sensor, which is composed of millions of tiny little sensors called photosites. Now let's stop right there for a moment, because these little guys get even more interesting, but I want you to keep in mind that all of this technology is crammed into something in many cases smaller than a postage stamp. It's a marvel of engineering that really deserves appreciation. Each one of these photosites is like a bucket which fills up with the energy present in the focused light. This amount is measured in voltage, which gets assigned to a specific digital number that represents how bright or dark it is. If the bucket doesn't fill up much, it will be a low value and a dark image. If the bucket fills up too much or overflows, it will result in an overexposed or washed out image. How sensitive these buckets are is a result of the camera's sensitivity settings in relation to ISO. The ISO in some ways can be seen as lifting the floor of the bucket so that it can fill up more easily. All this makes total sense so far, right? Except you're probably asking yourself one important question. If these photosites are measuring the electrical energy from the photons hitting them, how do they see color? It's true that the length of a photon's wavelength determines its color. However, the photosites are not measuring the wavelength, but the amount of energy. To see color, photosites are grouped together with the filters of additive primary colors red, green, and blue. The camera then takes the voltage readout of each one of these photosites and uses what's called an analog to digital converter to assign a value to each one. The final values of multiple color filtered photosites are mixed together using a process called debayering to create a single discrete colored pixel. This creation of a digital element such as the pixel requires the analog tonal values recorded by the photosites to be digitally encoded, and something called bit depth is vitally important to this process.
Bit depth determines how many digits can be used in the conversion from analog voltage to a digital signal for each of the red, green, and blue photosites. A greater bit depth results in more shades of each of those primary colors and a smoother transition from one color to the next. A small bit rate will result in poor quality and visual anomalies such as banding. A high bit rate consumes more data and requires more processing power than a lower one.
Many earlier systems used 8-bit color depth as the bare minimum, but newer systems use 10, 12, or even 16 bits.
The difference in the amount of shades of red, green, and blue from an 8-bit to a 16-bit system is massive, with an 8-bit system offering 256 different shades of each color versus a 16-bit system with a whopping 65,536 distinctly different shades. Now remember, we're going to get our final color data by combining these various shades of red, green, and blue, so the total possibilities of the color spectrum is even greater. An 8-bit system has a color spectrum of around 16.7 million colors, which sounds huge, but when you look at a 16-bit system, it would have a color spectrum containing up to 280 trillion colors.
These pixels are then mapped out to create a single frame or still image. Often there is some redundant values which are eliminated by a system called compression. This is necessary due to the sheer quantity of data required to create a high-resolution image. The less you compress an image, the more data is kept, and the truer to life the image remains. However, in most cases, quite a lot of redundant data can be discarded without affecting the overall image quality. This is essential, as if this data is not filtered out, the resulting file size would be huge. Keep in mind, the video you are watching has been through YouTube compression, so you can't judge this with 100% clarity, but take a look here at an example of an uncompressed photograph versus a compressed JPEG. Proper compression can vastly reduce the file size with a minimal impact on the image quality. Remember to multiply these numbers by your frame rate when shooting video, and you'll quickly understand the need for compression in order to have manageable file sizes. Our movie file is created using a particular codec, which is a set of instructions that determines the final bit depth and compression used in its creation. This tells the camera how to digitally encode the information it has received from the sensor and is later used to decode it for display on devices such as computers, monitors, TVs, smartphones, etc. We could have gone into more detail about how chroma subsampling, debayering, and other technical processes work, but I wanted to keep this as simple as possible while sharing enough information to show how the process in general works. I find it very fascinating how a camera can capture the energy of a photon and turn it into a photo. If you like these videos, please subscribe and feel free to leave a comment about a future video you might want me to make. This user feedback really helps me see what users are looking for and ensures I can continue to make helpful and educational videos. Until next time, thanks for watching.